Tune Review, print speaking to the blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the National Podcast, recorded at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @TuneReview, that is @ CUEANDREVIEW. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@tunereview.com, that is INFORMATION@CUEANDREVIEW.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
This is from The National on Friday the 3rd of March 2023, from the Politics section. Alex Salmond knew of HUMSA YOUSAF schedule clash 10 days before vote. This article is written by Ross Hunter. Alex Salmond has said that he was made aware that HUMSA YOUSAF had organised a ministerial appointment which clashed with the final vote on equal marriage legislation in 2014. Speaking to Sky News, Salmond said that he was contacted 10 days before the historic vote on the legislation which legalised same-sex marriage in Scotland, and told that YOUSAF was organising a meeting which would conflict with the final vote. He said, "My memory is that I was contacted 10 days or so before the vote and told that HUMSA was arranging a ministerial appointment. I've discussed it with people who were with me at the time, so I know it's their memory is the same as mine." When pressed by Sky News journalist Beth Rigby on the reason given why YOUSAF would skip the vote, Salmond said that the assumption was that he was facing pressure from religious groups. "I didn't discuss the thing at great length. The assumption was it was pressure. Well, a lot of religions were canvassing. There was no secret there was that. But it was a free vote. People could do what they liked. I had ministers who were against equal marriage and who voted against equal marriage, and they continued as ministers. You asked me what my memory was. Was I contacted to say that HUMSA had arranged a governmental meeting on the day of the vote, and that was some time before the vote? The answer is yes. I remember that. And I remember saying that Alex Neil had to be informed. But there was no question of having to ask permission. We just saw an interview where HUMSA accepted that there was pressure from various communities. But his memory may be different from mine. Let's put it that way. It comes after former SNP MSP Alex Neil, who has backed Kate Forbes to become the next leader of the SNP, claimed that YOUSAF purposefully arranged the meeting to clash with the Stage 3 vote on equal marriage. YOUSAF said he had an unavoidable meeting with the Pakistan Consul General at the time of the vote to discuss the case of a Scot with a history of mental illness being held on death row in the country. He has also cited his vote in favour of the legislation at Stage 1 as proof of his commitment to equal marriage. When asked whether Salmond's recollection was wrong by a Sky News reporter, YOUSAF said, "Yes. I mean, it is the most predictable political intervention, I have to say." He later issued a statement in which he claimed his support for equal marriage was unequivocal. "As I have said throughout this campaign, I was proud to vote in favour of equal marriage bill in Scotland's Parliament," he said. "I've never denied there was pressure on me regarding this vote, but I was vocal about my support for marriage equality at the time, and I remain totally unequivocal on that position. As your SNP First Minister, and as someone from a minority background myself, I will champion, defend and celebrate equal rights for all to the hilt." SNP MSP Joe Fitzpatrick, who was the SNP government's Minister for Parliamentary Business during the passing of the bill, added, "I was the government's Minister for Parliamentary Business at the time. All arrangements for ministers being handed permission to conduct vital government business during votes in Parliament were handled and approved by myself. While other ministers did raise concerns about the bill at the time, HUMSA was not one of them. HUMSA gave his full backing to the bill in its first vote through Parliament, and he continues to be a staunch ally of the LGBTQ+ community to this day and beyond. That article was written by Ross Hunter. This is from The National on Friday the 3rd of March 2023, from the news section. John Swinney to quit government after nearly 16 years. This article is written by Ross Hunter. John Swinney is to stand down as a minister following the SNP's leadership election. In a letter to Nicola Sturgeon, posted on Twitter, Swinney described serving in government since 2007 as the privilege of my life. However, he added that when a new First Minister is elected later this month, he will step down as Deputy First Minister, a role he has held since 2014, and serve as an MSP from the back benches. He wrote, "It has been the privilege of my life to serve in the Scottish Government since 2007 as a Cabinet Secretary, with responsibility first for finance and the economy, then education and skills, and finally COVID recovery. It has been an honour to serve Scotland as your Deputy First Minister since 2014. When I joined the Scottish National Party at the age of 15 in 1979, our political prospects were poor, and I could scarcely have imagined that over so many years I would have the opportunity to serve Scotland in government in the way I have. In all that I have undertaken in government, I have tried to listen carefully to different views and be open to the ideas and thoughts of people in Scotland. I have sought always to transform the life of chances of everyone who lives here. I have acted to make Scotland a fairer, more prosperous and more confident country that I believe would be assured with independence." He added, "These have been demanding commitments to fulfil over nearly 16 years, and I have decided that, when the First Minister is appointed later in March, I will stand down from government. I will continue to faithfully represent my constituents in Perthshire North and look forward to sitting with you on the backbenches of the Scottish Parliament to continue our contribution to Scotland's cause." In her reply, Nicola Sturgeon said she could not have wished for a better partner in government. She said, "Your contribution to our nation, almost 16 years in government, is considerable, indeed unique. Therefore, while I, perhaps more than most, completely understand your decision, I still feel a real sense of sadness when you told me of it. Over almost 16 years in government, more than 8 years as Deputy First Minister, indeed, the longest-serving Deputy First Minister so far, you have made countless contributions to the good of our people and our country. In short, I could not have wished for a better partner in government than you, and there is no doubt that our Scottish Government would have achieved much less had you not been in it. Please accept my thanks for your support, wisdom, and, above all, friendship, as together with ministers past and present, we sought to make Scotland a better place. As I said when I announced my own departure from office, serving as First Minister has been the privilege of my life. Having done so with you by my side as Deputy First Minister has been an honour. As for the future, I know you will continue to serve Scotland well, and that you will be, as you always have been, a source of good advice and wise counsel to our party, government and movement. I look forward to this new phase for both of us as we move to the backbenches and make way for the new generation who will now lead Scotland forward." Leadership candidate HUMSA YOUSAF, who was at SNP's first leadership hustings on Wednesday, described Swinney as one of his best friends in politics, also paid tribute to Swinney's contributions in government. He said, "John is a true giant of the SNP and the independence movement. Our party and our government owe much of our success to John's hard work, from securing the council tax freeze in the early days of government to expanding childcare as Education Secretary, finding the funds to help households through the cost of living crisis and enabling me to deliver fair pay for our NHS in recent weeks. John has long represented the good in our politics. His ability to win the respect of people from all political persuasions while passionately advocating his cause is an example everyone in politics should aspire to. On a personal level, he has always been a source of advice and support to me in good times and bad, from my days as a young activist to becoming colleagues around the cabinet table. John would be any First Minister's top pick to be in the cabinet, but I respect the reasons he has outlined for standing down from government once the First Minister demits office. Kate Forbes said that she had valued Swinney's advice to her over the years and wished him well for the future. I have such respect and admiration for John Swinney. John Swinney is not only an incredibly able politician who has put public service at the heart of his career, he's also somebody who I'd call a friend. He's a friend to many MSPs, and I have valued enormously his advice and guidance over the years. I wish him well because he has put in some shift. That article was written by Ross Hunter. This is from The National on Friday the 3rd of March 2023, from the news section. Majority of Scots support introduction of deposit return scheme. This article is written by Ross Hunter. 7 out of 10 Scots support the introduction of deposit return on drink bottles and cans in Scotland, a new poll has found. While the Scottish Government has come under fire from some in the drinks industry over plans to introduce a deposit return scheme, DRS, in August, 86% of people surveyed said they would use it either some or all of the time. The initiative will see shoppers charged a 20p deposit on all drinks, brought in single-use cans and bottles, with this cash refunded to them once they bring the empty containers back for recycling. It is hoped the scheme will boost recycling rates and reduce littering, with 90% agreeing littering is a problem in Scotland. The poll was conducted by the Diffley Partnership, with director and founder Mark Diffley saying the results of the survey were clear and unambiguous and showed strong public support for the DRS among all sections of the population. The survey, carried out for Tomra, a firm which produces reverse vending machines used to return empty bottles, found 72% wanted to see DRS introduced across the UK. The UK government has put forward its own proposals for a similar scheme, which is not due to come into force until 2025. With 65% of people questioned pleased Scotland is to be the first part of the UK to have such a system. Of the 1,080 people who were questioned, 42% said they would use DRS all the time, with 44% saying that they would participate in the scheme sometimes but not all the time. Meanwhile, only 14% said they would never use it. Fewer than a fifth of people were opposed to the initiative, with 8% saying they would somewhat oppose it, while 10% described themselves as being strongly opposed to it. In contrast, 43% said they strongly supported the introduction of DRS, with 27% saying they were somewhat supporting it. The biggest driver encouraging people to use the scheme is to prevent damage to the natural environment and animals, with this cited as a reason by 53%. Mr. Diffley said, "The data in this polling is clear and unambiguous, showing strong public support for the DRS among all sections of the population. There appears to be a strong correlation between environmental concerns and support for DRS, with support for the scheme being particularly high among those who are most concerned about climate change and who are motivated to use the scheme by a desire to stop damage to the environment." SNP leadership candidate Ash Regan has said she would scrap the scheme in its current form if she is elected. Kate Forbes has said it should be paused, while HUMSA YOUSAF pledged to bring in an exemption for small businesses for the first year of operation. John Lee, Vice President for Public Affairs for the UK and Ireland at TOMRA, said the firm wanted to ensure businesses and consumers are aware and prepared for the changes. He added, "As part of our work, we were keen to understand public opinion on the ground in Scotland, and the data gathered by the Diffley Partnership is extremely useful in helping us to understand that. International evidence suggests that DRS could reduce litter by a third, thereby increasing Scotland's chances of meeting our climate change targets, and TOMRA's experience across Europe suggests that the recycling return rate will be anywhere between 92% and 98%. We are here to offer our knowledge and experience to ensure that Scotland's journey to DRS is as smooth as it can be." Lorna Slater, the Scottish Greens Minister in charge of introducing the DRS scheme, said, "It's no surprise to see the public are firmly in favour of Scotland's deposit return scheme, which is a major part of our efforts to reduce littering, cut emissions and address the climate emergency." On track to launch in August, Scotland's DRS will reduce littering by a third and CO2 emissions by 4 million tonnes over 25 years. That's equivalent to taking 83,000 cars off the road, and it is just the latest in a series of successful examples in countries like Denmark, Germany and Canada. Businesses have also voted with their feet, with 664 drinks producers, representing over 90% of the total volume of drinks containers sold in Scotland each year, already registered for the scheme. They don't want broken bottles or plastic litter on our streets, parks and beaches either, and they recognise that this scheme is the way to end that blight. That article was written by Ross Hunter. This is from The National on Friday the 3rd of March 2023, from the news section. Man who posted about assassination of Nicola Sturgeon to be sentenced. This article is written by Dan Baker. A pensioner found guilty of threatening behaviour after posting online about the assassination of First Minister Nicola Sturgeon is due to be sentenced. William Curtis, 70, was convicted last month of sending threatening messages to Sturgeon and of sending or causing a threatening message to be sent to former MSP Stuart Stevenson in 2019, following a trial at the High Court in Glasgow. Jurors also found Curtis and another man, 60-year-old Philip Mitchell, assaulted and abducted a sheriff in a car park in Banff, Aberdeenshire, in June 2021. Mitchell claimed he was performing a citizen's arrest on Sheriff Robert MacDonald and had lawful authority to do so, but Lord Weir, in his direction to the jury, said there was nothing supporting this on an evidential basis. Curtis and Mitchell are due to be sentenced at the High Court in Glasgow on Friday. During the trial, Advocate Depute Chris McKenna read out a Facebook post from an account in the name of William Patrick Curtis that was flagged to Sturgeon's office manager John Skinner on March 6, 2019. It said, "We have reason to believe, while it is my intention to citizens arrest her, Ms. Sturgeon, to answer her treason over the last 3 years, serious people who reel the abuse to the electorate by her criminal activities warrants assassination of her and several misspelt of her ministers, on down to even civilians who work in all agencies, again misspelt, who have repeatedly lied to the electorate and conspired with the First Minister." Curtis's former partner, Alison Gould, confirmed to the court during the trial that he had a Facebook account in the name of the aforementioned social media profile. Mr. Skinner was asked in court what was made of the phrase warrant assassination of her, and he told the jury to murder the First Minister. Curtis was found guilty of behaving in a threatening or abusive manner which was likely to cause a reasonable person to suffer fear or alarm by sending an email and posting messages on social media in which he made threatening remarks towards Sturgeon on various occasions between February the 27th and March the 6th, 2019. He was also found guilty of sending or causing a threatening message to be sent to Stevenson on March the 9th, 2019. It had a link to a video relating to the murder of West Yorkshire MP Joe Cox. The court heard a direct message was sent on Facebook to Stevenson from a person called Carol Curtis, which read, "Your turn is coming," misspelt. "Of that you can be sure." Jurors also found Curtis guilty of a fourth charge of behaving in a threatening or abusive manner which was likely to cause a reasonable person to suffer fear or alarm by posting messages of a threatening and abusive nature in October 2020. Curtis had lodged a special defence of incrimination, claiming someone else committed the offence against Stevenson, but this was rejected by jurors. All of the offences occurred in Aberdeenshire. That article was written by Dan Baker.
This is from the National on Monday the 6th of March 2023. This is from the politics section. The headline reads, Joanna Cherry's claims SNP's machine is behind HUMSA YOUSAF. This article is by Adam Robertson. The SNP's party machine is behind HUMSA YOUSAF in the leadership contest, Joanna Cherry has claimed. The MP for Edinburgh South West told Good Morning Scotland that Ash Regan, the candidate she is backing, is making progress and that people should not write her off. Cherry declared her support for Regan at her campaign launch in North Queensferry on February 24th after ruling herself out of the contest. YOUSAF and Finance Secretary Kate Forbes are also in race to replace Nicola Sturgeon, with all three candidates set to go head-to-head at a hustings in Dumfries on Monday evening. Cherry said, "I think it's very wrong to write her, Regan, off. She's making progress, and I've heard a number of people say they've been switched on to her campaign after listening to her properly at the hustings." She added that Regan had showed some great courage and leadership when she resigned in opposition to the Scottish Government's gender recognition reforms. The sudden nature of Sturgeon's departure meant all three leadership campaigns had to be launched quickly with little preparation and no time to develop a policy platform, Cherry added. The MP continued, "It's no secret that the party machine is behind HUMSA and not behind Kate and Ash." When it was suggested to her that the party machine would deny this allegation, she said, "The majority of parliamentarians who have declared are behind HUMSA. We've already had a couple of cases of people wrongfully using the party's internal mailing system to support HUMSA. The National has approached YOUSAF's campaign for comment." Cherry's comments come after Robin McAlpine, former director of pro-independence think tank Commonweal, questioned a number of decisions taken by SNP executives. He said that cutting the length of the contest to 4 weeks, forbidding candidates from spending more than £5,000 on their campaigns, and seeking to exclude the media from hustings were intended to favour YOUSAF. In a blog post he said, "This is all taking place with no effort at all being made to pretend that the entire resources of the SNP are not being put in the hands of one candidate. The party's election rules, for example, use of email lists, are being broken with such impunity that the only conclusion is that the SNP machine has nothing but utter contempt for its members. This is all because their candidate is so weak that even with a full machinery of the party, its researchers, its event organisers and all the rest, he doesn't look fit to be the First Minister." The SNP were approached for comment. On Sunday, the three leadership candidates took part in an online hustings which went ahead in private after the first three were live-streamed for all to watch. Kate Forbes said that she made the case for a well-being economy during the 2-hour event, while HUMSA YOUSAF said he had spoken about the importance of bringing both the party and the country together. Thus far, candidates have marked themselves apart on some of the big issues, including independence. Regan has proposed a voter empowerment mechanism, which would see the SNP treat every election as a de facto referendum. Meanwhile, YOUSAF has said the SNP is too bogged down in discussions of strategy and that they need to make the case for a progressive Scotland to convince more people. Forbes had said Scotland should aim to hold an independence referendum within 3 months of the next general election, and that the prospectus for it must be revised and written by the party and not by the British Civil Service. The article was by Adam Robertson. This is from the National on Monday the 6th of March 2023. This is from the news section. The headline reads, Scotland weather. Met Office extends snow and ice warning. This article is by Rebecca Carey. The Met Office has extended a yellow snow and ice weather warning for parts of Scotland. The National Weather Service already put in place a yellow alert for northern and eastern parts of the country from 12 a.m. on Monday, March the 6th until 10 a.m. on Tuesday, March the 7th. However, the forecaster has also extended the warning from midnight on Tuesday until 10 a.m. on Wednesday, March the 8th. Frequent snow showers are predicted too and will likely cause some travel disruption. Heavy snow is also expected to cause significant disruption in the Highlands, Grampian, Central, Tayside and Fife, Strathclyde, Lothian and Borders into Thursday and Friday. The warning has been extended for these regions from 3 a.m. on Thursday to 6 p.m. on Friday, March the 10th. Here's everything you need to know about what to expect from the warning and the areas that will be affected. The Met Office has advised those living and working within the affected areas of the following conditions. There is a small chance of travel delays on roads with some stranded vehicles and passengers, along with delayed or cancelled rail and air travel. There is a slight chance that some rural communities could become cut off. A small chance of injuries from slips and falls on icy surfaces. And there's a small chance that power cuts will occur and other services such as mobile phone coverage may be affected. Here are the areas in Scotland that are covered by the yellow weather alert. Central Tayside and Fife, Angus, Clackmannanshire, Dundee, Falkirk, Fife, Perth and Kinross, Stirling. In Grampian, Aberdeen, Aberdeenshire and Moray. Highlands and Islandseer, Islandseer, Highland. Orkney and Shetlands, Orkney Islands, Shetland Islands. South West Scotland, Lothian Borders, East Lothian, Edinburgh, Midlothian Council, Scottish Borders, Dumfries and Galloway, West Lothian. Strathclyde, Argyll and Bute, East Ayrshire, East Dumbartonshire, East Renfrewshire, Glasgow, Inverclyde, North Ayrshire, North Lanarkshire, Renfrewshire, South Ayrshire, South Lanarkshire, West Dumbartonshire. The Met Office has told Scots to expect continued cold, blustery, northerly winds that will drive snow and hail showers north on Tuesday. The highest accumulation of snow are likely again over the high ground of northern Scotland, where another 5 to 10 centimetres are possible by the end of the day. Lower levels are most likely to see snow on Tuesday in the early hours, where 2 to 5 centimetres could accumulate locally. It added, during Tuesday night, showers will then tend to become increasingly confined to northern Scotland. Icy stretches are likely, especially on untreated surfaces, particularly during hours of darkness. That article was by Rebecca Carey. This is from the National on Monday the 6th of March 2023. This is from the news section. The headline reads, SNP leadership, Ash Regan pledges to establish Party Activist Academy. The article is by Abby Garton Crosby. Leadership contender Ash Regan has pledged to establish an SNP Activist Academy within the party to build a powerful team at all levels. The Edinburgh Eastern MSP announced on Monday morning that if she wins the contest to become the next First Minister, she will build on the existing SNP college format to educate activists and widen access to more members in the party. The existing SNP college describes itself as a route for building campaigners to take learning pathways crafted specifically for SNP members, enabling you to level up your involvement. Under Regan's plan, new members will be able to access a variety of online modules, in-person training and certification in a number of areas. This would include helping them to familiarise themselves with the party structure and inner workings, as well as setting out how they can get involved in campaigning and activism. Regan said, "The SNP Academy will ensure that we harness and share skills across our party to build a powerful team at all levels. Access for all our members to the best-in-class political education and practical campaigning skills, built up across our membership from decades of breaking new ground in political campaigning and policy setting. New members' onboarding skills to familiarise with the party structure, how to get things done, and opportunities to get actively involved at whatever level members are comfortable with." Regan's team split her plan for an SNP Activist Academy into 4 categories: campaigners, leaders, branch representatives, and connecting the team. The Campaign in a Box module would teach members campaign logistics, how to frame a message, and ear-to-ground campaigning. For those looking to take on a leadership role, support and training will be given by proven leaders and experts, and will include public speaking, media, and vetting training, as well as being assigned to an SNP's tutor for ongoing support. For those who want to take part in the local branch activities, a module setting out the roles and pathways to the branch, and how this connects with regional and national hubs will be offered, as well as practical support from areas including IT skills and conference resolutions. Regan also said there would be Duolingo style learning pathways available, as well as certification for key branch roles. The final strand, connecting the team, would feature contributions by prominent members of the SNP and would include video and podcast content. It comes as the SNP leadership containers were asked to answer 10 key questions on policies ranging from whisky tax to National Care Service by the SNP's trade union group. Elsewhere, Regan and fellow contenders Kate Forbes and HUMSA YOUSAF were urged to set out their commitments to tackling climate change by over 100 Scottish environmental groups. The article was by Abby Garton Crosby. This is from the National on Monday the 6th of March 2023. This is from the politics section. The headline reads, "SNP leadership contenders urged to pick up the pace on climate change." The article is by Abby Garton Crosby. A coalition of environmental groups have written to the SNP leadership contenders and urged them to pick up the pace on action to reduce emissions and tackle the climate crisis if they become the next First Minister. Over 100 organisations signed an open letter calling on candidates HUMSA YOUSAF, Kate Forbes and Ash Regan to commit to strong action on climate and nature, and to set out how they will deliver fast progress on looming targets. Stop Climate Chaos Scotland and Scottish Environment Link were among the organisations that acknowledged the positive steps made by outgoing First Minister Nicola Sturgeon and the Scottish Government, from setting ambitious climate targets to providing international leadership and committing finance to climate-induced loss and damage suffered by countries in the Global South. But now, the group of environmental campaigners are calling for assurances from those seeking to take over from Sturgeon and demanded to know how they will build on her legacy. They have asked for leadership contenders to champion climate justice and deliver an accelerated just transition, as well as standing against any new oil and gas licence in the North Sea. It comes after the North Sea Transition Authority, the NSTA, are due to approve over 100 licences as part of the UK Government's bid to boost domestic production. After the Scottish Government's independent climate advisors, the Committee on Climate Change, CCC, warned that Scotland's climate targets are in danger of becoming meaningless and voiced strong concerns about the lack of a clear emissions delivery plan. Mike Robinson, Chair of Stop Climate Chaos Scotland, said, "Scotland's next First Minister must renew and deepen Scotland's status as a credible climate champion, both at home and internationally. While Scotland is seen by many as a leader in climate, the reality is that progress has been nowhere near fast enough. With 7 of the last 11 emission reduction targets missed, all 3 candidates to be the next First Minister should publicly commit to prioritising climate action and that they would urgently pick up the pace of delivering solutions if elected. The good news is that many of these positive changes bring wider benefits and would also address the other overlapping crises we face through making our homes warmer, tackling inequality and securing more sustainable jobs. Deborah Long, Chief Officer at Scottish Environmental Link, said, "Protecting our environment is the biggest challenge facing humanity, and it's essential that those seeking to be First Minister commit to treating the planet as a priority. This is a vital decade for action, and there are enormous opportunities for Scotland to restore iconic habitats and protect the abundance and diversity of our wildlife. We all depend on a healthy natural environment, and nature is the first line of defence against climate change. But Scotland has suffered a high rate of historic nature loss and faces even bigger threats today. We hope that all political leaders can embrace this challenge." The letter identifies several key opportunities for the new First Minister to drive action on climate and nature, such as the Scottish Government's new energy strategy and Just Transition Plan, the upcoming climate change plan and reform to agricultural support. Additionally, to fund these measures and contribute to international climate justice, the organisations emphasise the need to review the fiscal measures available to raise new and additional source of finance by making polluters pay for their damage. Robertson added, "We know that people in Scotland are greatly concerned about the climate and nature crisis and want to see action. The next First Minister must build on the positive, but as yet insufficient, steps made by delivering the transformational changes we need to see and by positioning Scotland as a true leader in delivering for climate and nature." That article was by Abby Garton Crosby. This is from the National on Monday the 6th of March 2023. This is from the news section. The headline reads, "Tennock's Farm, house built without permission ordered to be removed." This article is by Rost Hanvidge. A farm owner who built a new house on his land without planning permission has been told to remove it and restore the site to its former condition. Building work on the 5-bedroom home began during the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, and the property was completed in December 2021. However, Gareth Wilson, who lives on site at Tennock's Farm, did not submit a formal planning application for the development until a local authority enforcement order required him to do so in March 2022. North Ayrshire Council's Planning Department then refused the application in July last year, before the council's local review body dismissed an appeal by Mr Wilson to overturn the decision, meaning the development remains unauthorised. At a meeting of the council's planning committee last month, councillors agreed to serve a further notice requiring the removal of the unauthorised dwelling house, associated outbuildings and ancillary works, and the restoration of the land to its former condition prior to the development taking place. Retrospective permission was denied for the new house at Tennock's Farm between Kilbirnie and Dalry, as council planning officers deemed there was no need for it at the site and its design was not considered exceptional or bespoke, in line with local development policies. The Coal Authority also found that the L-shaped building may be at significant risk to collapse as mines have been located under the site. A handling report explaining the previous decision said, in conclusion, it is not considered that the application site constitutes a gap site, and given the potential risk to ground stability, it may not be an appropriate location even if it were. A report for the February 22nd meeting of the Planning Committee stated, the Council's leading development plan, LDP, supports housing in the countryside only in exceptional circumstances. As noted, Tennock's Farm is within a rural area of North Ayrshire. The impact of the unauthorised development of a dwelling house, outbuildings and ancillary developments on the land is considered to be harmful to the amenity of the countryside and contrary to the LDP. Mr Wilson, who has the right to appeal the latest notice to Scottish ministers, will be given 6 months to comply with its terms. In a separate development, He applied at the start of February for retrospective permission to change the use of agricultural land at the farm to form a yard, as well as the erection of an additional storage shed on the site. One public objection has been received to the plans, claiming that the site is already overdeveloped, and the proposal further contributes to the spread of sporadic and unplanned developments around Tennock's farm. Mr. Wilson is seeking to use the proposed new storage shed to house his growing collection of vintage vehicles and agricultural machinery, according to a supporting document. The article was by Ross Hanvidge.
From the National, Thursday the 9th of March 2023. Opinion. Let's get the facts right before we hit out at religion. By Alistair Allen. A friend of mine was in Malawi recently, a country with which Scotland has legendarily strong ties. Visiting a school, he noticed that a girl in a history class was drawing a large and complicated flowchart. My friend was curious to know what it represented. The girl explained that this was the simplest way to set out all the splits in the Church of Scotland since the middle of the 18th century. The point of my anecdote is this: it's complicated. The pattern and variety of religious belief in Scotland is certainly more complicated than 280 angry characters on Twitter are ever likely to manage to convey. I am supporting HUMSA YOUSAF to be First Minister. I am, incidentally, since people are asking these things at the moment, also someone who would place myself personally quite far towards, although possibly not quite at, the liberal end of the Church of Scotland. However, as a politician, I'm not going to make any religious pronouncements beyond that declaration of interests. People of all faiths and none, as well as peoples of all races, in all types of relationships and family units, have a right to not merely be tolerated but to be respected. I can't see how any other type of Scotland is likely to prosper. But I do also want to say something about religious stereotypes. Even within my own island constituency, the picture is one of deeply held and largely amicable diversity. Yet the social media, and the national media in general, often doesn't even to bother people with the right to label people with the right stereotype that applies to the denomination in question. If you're going to reach the caricatures in any part of the country, then please at least do your research. In the southern half of the Outer Hebrides, the Reformation essentially never happened, meaning that Roman Catholicism remains the largest denomination there. I often find myself explaining this fact to puzzled visitors who had idly assumed that Catholicism in Scotland was solely the product of very valuable waves of immigration. At the other end of my constituency, there are a wide variety of Presbyterian denominations, not least the Free Church, which broke away across Scotland from the Church of Scotland in 1843. The Free Church, to a great extent, reunited with the Church of Scotland a few decades later, except in the Highlands and Islands. Although theologically traditionalist and socially conservative in many ways, again, it's important not to deal in stereotypes about that. It was the Free Church which was probably far more vocal than most people about the sufferings of the Highlanders during these clearances, and it was a Free Church minister who recently backed the right of the Muslim community in Stornoway to build a mosque. In my view, and in the view of the SNP too, as far as I can see, people have a perfect right to much more traditionalist or conservative views than my own. They even have a right to express views that may offend people, as long as they are prepared to have them politely challenged by others. What is unacceptable, however, is for anyone, from any perspective, to hurl online abuse. Perhaps, sadly, that is an inevitability when many angry people are often unable to distinguish between different denominations, let alone the subtleties of differing views held at varying points along the Presbyterian flowchart. People have every right to interrogate organised religion and its mixed record, but they also have responsibilities to check their facts before they hit out. The equivalent advice may also be addressed to people of faith, I would hasten to add. Perhaps the best option, in the unlikely event that Twitter is reading this article, is for all of us, regardless of our religion, to heed the words, given in a very different context, by Scotland's Makar Edwin Morgan. He asked us to simply deplore what is to be deplored, and then find out the rest. And that was a comment piece by Alistair Allen. From the National, Monday the 6th of March 2023. From the comment section. Market for revenge porn suggests something is seriously wrong, by columnist Kirsty Strickland. Reality TV personality Stephen Bear was sentenced to 21 months in prison on Friday after being found guilty of voyeurism and sharing intimate videos without consent. He filmed himself having sex with fellow reality TV star Georgia Harrison and then uploaded the footage to subscription site OnlyFans without her permission. Jurors were told that he had earned £2,000 in the video in question. During the trial, Harrison described her ordeal and how it had affected her, saying that it led her to the worst state of my life. I can't explain the shame I felt. I did not want to leave my room. She also said knowing that the video was being circulated online made her feel completely worthless. She said, "People are looking at you and having sexual gratification over you, and it's completely out of your control." She waived her right to anonymity in the case so that she could speak out about the harms of what is commonly known as revenge porn, but is more accurately described as image-based sexual abuse. It's an abhorrent crime, and one which, as a society, we haven't quite caught up with yet. Once an image has been widely circulated among a peer group or uploaded to the internet without consent, there is no way of undoing that harm. Victims can ask for it to be deleted from one website, only for it to pop up in another. The knowledge that somebody is looking at an intimate image of you without your consent, somebody you have never even met, is profoundly distressing for victims. It's easy to understand why so many people decide not to report incidents to the police and opt to try and forget that it ever happened. As with other crimes that are predominantly perpetrated by men against women, it has become a magnet for victim blaming. Women who have their privacy violated in such a way are blamed for the fact that the image or video exists in the first place. They are blamed for being too trusting when the focus should be on perpetrators for not being trustworthy enough. This might be a relatively new harm, but the misogyny that underpins it is as old as its time. The rapid growth of instances of revenge porn is indicative of a much wider issue that we must grapple with. For every scumbag like Stephen Bear, who has so little respect for women that he cares more about money and fame than their privacy, there are hundreds of inactive bystanders who show equal contempt or care for others. There is a market for images and videos obtained without the consent of the women in them. What does that say about us as a society? There are the friends who share images of their girlfriends or ex-girlfriends in group chats, and there are whole websites dedicated to the leaked nude images of celebrities. Hundreds of people paid money to see the footage of Bear having sex with Harrison. Image-based sexual abuse has been illegal since 2015, but it is notoriously difficult for victims to secure a conviction. After the sentencing of Bear, the Deputy Chief Crown Prosecutor for the East of England said that Bear had taken away Harrison's right to privacy in order to make money in the most egregious way. Whether or not sex is consensual, it is a crime to share or threaten to share sexual images without consent to cause distress, she said. It has been almost three years since Harrison's ordeal began, and the courage she has shown since has been remarkable. In pursuing this, she will have been all too aware of the bile and hatred that would be directed her way on social media. She will have known that strangers would blame her for what happened, or cast aspersions on her motivations for reporting it to the police. She has shown real guts and selflessness too. As a former Love Island contestant, Harrison has a large online following. Young women will have followed this case and heard the clear message that the verdict and sentencing sends out. This is not okay. Women who find themselves in a similar situation shouldn't feel shame or fear. They haven't done anything wrong. The shame and fear should always lie with the perpetrators of this disgusting crime, not the victims. Young men will have come across the case too. They can see the consequences of engaging in what their peers might have previously led them to believe is just banter or lad culture. Discussions about so-called revenge porn often focus on the conversations we should be having with our daughters about how they should protect themselves against it. Perhaps we should also think a bit more about the guidance we are giving our sons. And that comment piece was by Kirsty Strickland. From the National, Thursday the 9th of March 2023, Comment. Tory Stop the Boats campaign is both inhumane and diversionary. By Foreign Affairs editor David Pratt. Watching Home Secretary Suella Braverman extol the benefits of her proposed illegal migration bill on television the other night, I couldn't help thinking back to a day in 2015. It was then, on the Greek island of Kos, that I met an Iraqi man called Ali Chadan. Long before our encounter, Ali had watched his wife die and feared for his children as the barbaric fighters of the Islamic State, IS, group drew ever closer to the district in which they lived. It was at that moment that he decided, as any decent father would, that the time had come to spirit his loved ones away to safety and make the journey to Europe, where he would join his mother and sister already settled in Switzerland. Instead, just a few weeks later, having set out from Turkey, he found himself, along with his children and 40 other refugees from Syria and Iraq alone at night in the freezing waters of the Aegean Sea, after the rubber boat into which they had been crammed founders on the waves. For the next 2 hours, Ali trod water, his 3 youngsters clinging to him for dear life. A 4th and eldest child, still only 10 years old, had struck out for shore on his father's orders, a swim that would save his own life. During that interminable time in the water, Ali watched helplessly as his youngest boy Hussein, only 6 years old, drifted off in the night sea. As if this was not horror enough, later, after struggling into a beach frozen and exhausted, with his 2 daughters, 9-year-old Harwar and youngest child 4-year-old Zainab, he would have to confront the fact that the ordeal had proved too much for Zainab, who died shortly afterwards. Now just ask yourself these questions. What person would make such a dangerous undertaking without real reason? What must it be like to watch your child slip away from your grasp in the ocean, never to be seen again? What goes through your head when a short time later another of your children dies from heart failure before your eyes on the beach? When we met, I was accompanying Ali with help of some local boat owners to scour the shoreline looking for some sign, anything, of his missing son. It's not that he expects to find the boy, just that he feels a sense of guilt he couldn't save him and cannot leave without at least looking for Hussein's body, one of the volunteers with us told me discreetly that day. To this moment, I still cannot begin to imagine what Ali Chadan went through, and most likely still going through, which takes me back to Braverman, Rishi Sunak, and their obscene, for that's what it is, Stop the Boats campaign and illegal migration bill. On the face of it, stopping the boats, which are often run by mercenary traffickers, would be a good thing, depriving them of their income and ensuring those escaping war or persecution do not run the risk of such perilous crossings, in this case, the English Channel. But the problem is that to date there are few other routes for people to use when fleeing to claim asylum in Britain. The UK government talks of introducing new safe routes, but says it must first fix the small boats problem, something that refugee groups say is totally the wrong way round. Whenever put on the spot, Braverman is unable to say how someone with links to the UK fleeing persecution could come to the UK via a safe and legal route. In fact, appearing before a parliamentary select committee last year, she could not cite a single safe and legal route that a 16-year-old African boy fleeing danger could take to the UK. No one doubts that there are predatory criminals prepared to let people down for profit, as was the case with Ali Chadan and his family. But these traffickers that Braverman obsesses about are not the cause of the problem, they are the result of an asylum system that feeds their profits. Be it deportations to Rwanda, proposals to streamline the Modern Slavery Act so it cannot be abused, or an annual cap in the number of asylum seekers allowed into the country, all of these Tory policies speak for themselves. It's also in the language that Braverman uses, talking as she does about an invasion of Britain's southern coast, and how she's on the side of the law-abiding patriotic majority, who, according to the Home Secretary, have said enough is enough. Only yesterday she was quoted as saying ludicrously that there are 100 million people displaced around the world, and likely billions more eager to come here if possible. As the Tory peer Gavin Barwell was even forced to admit, this is patent nonsense and is resorting to the language of extremists. But all this blaming of the foreigner, the migrant, the outsider, serves another Tory purpose. Such ploys and language help shift attention away from those really to blame for the UK's ills. These predators and profiteers are the real villains of the piece year. Tax dodgers and poverty wage-paying bosses, a cosy and frankly quite often corrupt relationship between government and big business, though nothing new in itself, has become the leitmotif and raison d'etre for the likes of Sunak, Braverman, and those they really represent. If there's one thing the so-called cost of living crisis tells us, it's not just about the grim familiarity of its victims, but what again confirms about those who are its architects and beneficiaries. Right now, we are surrounded in the UK by Tory politicians whose policies are simply about promoting greater wealth and power for those at the top. Under such people, the political landscape feels like an eerily unregulated, ungoverned place, unless you happen to be part of the elite that stands to benefit. And that's where the illegal migration bill helps. Look over there, it's those damn foreigners, those freeloaders sneaking into good old Britannia that we need to keep an eye on, goes the prevailing Tory message behind its smoke screen. You can expect to hear that stop the boats mantra a lot more from the likes of Braverman and Sunak in the weeks and months ahead. For while the message is undoubtedly inhumane, it's also the perfect diversion, and that's just what the Tories want right now. And that was a comment piece by Foreign Affairs editor David Pratt. From the National, Monday the 6th of March 2023, from the Culture section, BBC Radio 2 replaces Ken Bruce's Popmaster with New Quiz by Emilia Kettle. BBC Radio 2 is set to launch a brand new weekday pop quiz in a bid to replace Ken Bruce's Popmaster. The quiz, 10 to the Top, will be hosted by broadcaster Gary Davis, who will be presenting the mid-morning show until new host Vernon Kay takes over in May. 10 to the Top will premiere today, Monday, March the 6th, with the BBC saying it's an accumulator quiz when it pays to answer the questions correctly in order. Adding, 10 to the Top will test our listeners' music knowledge as they battle for pop supremacy. In the new quiz, players will be asked 10 questions about pop music, with the first question worth 1 point and the second question worth 2 points, all the way up to 10. But if a question is incorrect, the value of the following question goes back to 1 point and the accumulator begins again. BBC Radio 2 launches brand new quiz to replace Popmaster. The BBC also shared that each contestant will have a joker to play on one question, which will earn them double points if answered correctly, and the player with the most points wins a smart speaker. The new quiz comes after veteran Scottish radio presenter Bruce left the station after he signed off from his final Radio 2 show on Friday, March the 3rd. After announcing his departure, Bruce shared he would be moving to Bowers, Greatest Hits Radio in April to present a new mid-morning show, taking with him the Popmaster game. And that article was written by Emilia Kettle.
From The National, Tuesday the 7th of March 2023, from the news section. HUMSA YOUSAF. UK honours system is corrupt to the core. By Steph Braun. SNP leadership candidate HUMSA YOUSAF has branded the honours system in the UK as corrupt to the core and has called for the House of Lords to be abolished. The Health Secretary made the comments after Boris Johnson nominated his father Stanley for a knighthood as part of his resignation honours list. It was also previously reported that Johnson was looking to name 4 sitting Conservative MPs for a peerage, including Secretary of State for Scotland, Alistair Jack, and Nadine Dorries, who has since announced she will be stepping down as an MP. During a campaign visit to Lanark on Monday, YOUSAF said on the honours system, "It's corrupt to the core, the honours system, and the House of Lords should be abolished. It's an abomination and an affront to democracy." What I would say very clearly is it's not only Stanley Johnson, of course, it's Alistair Jack, who's been awarded a peerage for being a cheerleader for Boris Johnson while he was partying away while the rest of us were in lockdown. So Alistair Jack should do the decent thing and resign. The Times reported that Johnson's nominations included up to 100 names and that it was considerably longer than that of his predecessors Theresa May and David Cameron, with the list currently making its way through Cabinet Office vetting. A spokesperson for the former PM said, "We don't comment on honours." SNP MP Tommy Shepherd said Johnson was making a mockery of the system. In 2021, senior Tory MP Carolyn Noakes and a journalist publicly accused Stanley, a former MEP, of inappropriately touching her at a Conservative Party conference. He denied the incidents, saying he had no recollection of Carolyn Noakes at all. The former Prime Minister has previously faced accusations of cronyism after he nominated his brother Joe Johnston for a peerage in 2020. This article was by Steph Braun.
The National News on Wednesday, the 8th of March. Coal power stations placed on standby for energy crisis fired up. An article written by Judith Duffy. 2 coal-fired power stations placed on standby during the energy crisis have begun producing electricity for UK homes for the first time this winter. The generation sites in West Burton, Lincolnshire, run by French energy giant EDF, started producing electricity on Tuesday afternoon. It came as strikes in France reduced the amount of electricity the country could supply to Britain through undersea cables. Wind electricity production is also unusually low. The government approached several coal-fired power stations last year that were set to close down, asking them to be on standby this winter amid an energy supply crunch. The plants have been warmed up a few times so far this winter on cold, overcast and still days, but Tuesday is the first time they've started to produce electricity. The National Grid Electricity System Operator has to ensure there is always more electricity generation available than it expects households to use. It aims to keep a comfortable margin between the two, which led to the coal plants being activated on Tuesday, with blackouts in any parts of the UK said to be highly unlikely. The system operator had also issued a so-called electricity margin notice, but cancelled it at around 3:30 p.m. as it realised it had enough power on the grid to meet demand. This is designed to let generators know that the margins are tighter than normal and to ask them if they can supply extra electricity. An electricity margin notice has been issued to the market, the system operator said earlier in the day. This is a routine tool that we use most winters and means that we are asking generators to make available any additional generation capacity that they may have. The notice does not mean electricity supply is at risk. An article written by Judith Duffy. The National News on Wednesday, the 8th of March. NHS staff burnt out and exhausted. An article written by Gregor Young. Doctors' leaders have told how NHS staff in Scotland have been left depleted, exhausted and facing burnout, as they spoke out about the worryingly high number of consultant posts that are lying empty. New figures from Public Health Scotland showed that while the number of consultants employed in NHS Scotland had increased by 2.3% over last year, to stand at 5,908.7 whole-time equivalent positions, the number of vacancies also rose. However, Health Secretary HUMSA YOUSAF stressed NHS staffing was at a historically high level, with record numbers of medical and dental staff, as well as allied health professionals. At the end of December 2022, some 413.2 whole-time equivalent consultant jobs were empty, up from 392.8 at the end of September 2022. Official figures showed that overall, the number of people employed in Scotland's NHS rose by 0.1% over 2022 to 155,926.9 whole-time equivalent posts at the end of the year, an increase of 17.6% over the last decade. Vacancies fell, going from 6,319.3 whole-time equivalent at the end of September to 5,779.2 by the end of the year. Speaking about the consultant vacancies, Dr. Alan Robertson of the British Medical Association, or BMA, Scottish Consultants Committee, said that the total remained worryingly high. He added that research by BMA Scotland at the end of last year suggests that there are substantial numbers of vacancies not included in official figures, and the real figure is therefore likely to be much higher. He continued, "Another huge cause of concern is the increase in the number of posts which have been vacant for 6 months or more, rising to 212 from 199 last quarter, suggesting that finding permanent staff to fill the gaps is proving to be significantly challenging. Staff sickness levels are also now at their highest since 2013. Describing the situation as simply unsustainable, Dr. Robertson said, "Once again, I'm sure we'll hear that NHS staffing levels are at a record high, but saying this to staff on the ground who are depleted, exhausted, and facing burnout is not just demoralising, but incredibly insulting. Staff are working flat out, doing absolutely everything they can to cope with rising demand, which is spiralling rapidly out of control." Dr. Robertson said that just because there are more people on the payroll than before does not mean there is enough. He told how the workforce was now running on empty, adding, "There is simply nothing left to give." Mr. YOUSAF said, "We continue to train more medical professionals. In the last 8 years, the number of available medical school places at Scottish universities will have increased by 55%, an extra 469 places, to a record high of 1,317. We have substantially more nurses per head of population than is the case in NHS England. Our latest pay offer ensures that they are the best paid in the UK. In fact, the UK government would need to give NHS nurses in England a 14% pay rise to match the pay we're offering in Scotland." An article written by Gregor Young. The National Politics on Wednesday the 8th of March. Sawa blamed for playing games as Tories gain council control. An article written by Xander Elliotts. The Conservatives have taken control of a Scottish council after Labour's constitutional games were blamed for the collapse of the ruling Rainbow Coalition. Dumfries and Galloway Council had been led by councillors from the SNP and Labour, with support from Independents and the Lib Dems. However, last month the Labour co-leader Linda Dorwood stepped down, citing clear political and policy differences. That left the SNP's Stephen Thompson as sole leader of the council, leading an unstable coalition without Labour's backing. The budget process 1 month later saw the SNP's proposals fail as Labour abstained, except on their own proposals, and the Tories won the votes of 1 Lib Dem and 2 Independents. After the passing of the Conservatives' budget, Mr Thompson said his position had become untenable and resigned. The opening at the top of the council led to a leadership race, with both the Tories, who are the largest group with 17 seats, and Labour, who have 8 seats, aiming to take control. The SNP, who has 11 councillors, abstained, but the Conservatives were able to install their own members at the head of the council thanks to backing again from Independents and 1 Lib Dem. Gail McGregor, the Tory group leader, was elected leader of Dumfries and Galloway Council, while fellow Conservative Malcolm Johnston was elected deputy leader and convener. The appointments were welcomed by Conservative MSPs, including Stephen Kerr, Murdo Fraser and Finlay Carson. But Angus SNP councillor Lloyd Melville said Labour should be ashamed. Cameron Garrett, the co-convener of the Dumfries and Galloway Greens, also criticised Labour for the Tory takeover. He said on Twitter, "The responsibility for this lies squarely with Scottish Labour playing national politics at a local level. We have clearly seen the damage Tories have done in Westminster. Now expect people's lives to be worse off in Dumfries and Galloway too." It comes after suggestions that Scottish Labour had interfered in order to put an end to the coalition between them and the SNP, which was an embarrassment to Anas Sarwar, who had repeatedly pledged his party would do no such thing. An article written by Xander Elliotts. The National Politics on Wednesday, the 8th of March. Stephen Flynn says Starmer and Sunak being cowardly on Brexit. An article written by Adam Robertson. The Prime Minister and Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer will suffer over their cowardly stance on the UK's economic relationship with the EU, the SNP's Westminster leader has warned. Stephen Flynn said the chickens will come home to roost, as he accused both Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer of being too afraid to face the real damage of Brexit. The Aberdeen South MP also said that it was wishful thinking on the part of the Unionists to suggest any weakening of the independence cause following Nicola Sturgeon's announcement that she will resign as First Minister. If they think the SNP is waiting to go quietly into the night, they've got another think coming, he added. He said that the next generation in the party wanted to drive things forward now. Speaking to the PA news agency about the UK's relationship with the EU, Mr Flynn said, "All roads lead there, but the Prime Minister and the contender for Prime Minister don't want to talk about it, despite, of course, the obvious benefits it would bring in the immediate term. And I think on this issue in particular, Keir Starmer has been found wanting, and quite badly." He added, "What they're ignoring is the real damage that it's causing to the economy, and that's particularly the case in Scotland." On securing independence, Mr Flynn said, "Nothing should be off the table in terms of strategy. I'm not going to seek to tie the hands of a future leader of the party in relation to where we should or shouldn't go. But what I do want us to do is focus heavily on the why. Why is independence important? And then the process will come with that." He also spoke about staff shortages in the public and private sectors, adding, "They're being cowardly. They're too afraid to take on the reality of the situation and be honest with the public. I don't think that does them any favours, and I think the chickens will come home to roost before the general election in that regard." Ahead of Jeremy Hunt's spring budget next week, Mr Flynn said the Chancellor doesn't just need to freeze energy bills, he needs to cut them, adding that Scotland was fuel poor under Westminster's watch. Looking at the SNP stance on scrapping the non-dom tax status, expanding the windfall tax, increasing public sector pay and energy bill assistance, he said, "It's almost like Labour have copied a lot of the successful policies of the Scottish Government. The big chasm exists between ourselves and Labour when it comes to the EU. The most obvious way to grow the economy is to rejoin the single market and customs union." His party's priority, he said, was about ensuring Scotland is in a position to grow our economy, but also to protect households from the worst of the cost of living crisis. There needs to be immediate action on energy bills to protect households. He added, "That's why we're saying that the Chancellor doesn't just need to freeze energy bills, he needs to cut them, because the damage it's doing to people in Scotland is real, and it's impacting people on a daily basis." On growth, he said, "There's a very simple answer to this. Keir Starmer is afraid to say it. There's no chance Rishi Sunak will say it. Although he did, he kind of let it slip last week in relation to the Northern Ireland Protocol, that they need to be in discussions with the EU about rejoining the single market. That's what businesses want to see. We need to see the government take action in terms of protecting benefits and pensions in line with inflation. That's hugely important as well." Current Scottish Finance Secretary Kate Forbes faces Scottish Health Secretary HUMSA YOUSAF and former Scottish Government Minister Ash Regan in the race to succeed Nicola Sturgeon. Mr Flynn has yet to declare who he is backing in the contest and confirmed he did not know if he would necessarily reveal who it was, as he felt it was important that party members were able to have a fair and frank discussion on these things. To those unionists welcoming Miss Sturgeon's exit, he said, "Now, if they think the SNP is waiting to go quietly into the night, they've got another think coming, because there's a numerous group of folk of my age and around it, the next generation, as we're often called, who want to drive things forward now, and I actually think utilising the experience and wisdom of many of our established parliamentarians." He added, "When you look at the polls, if you're under the age of 30, if you're under the age of 40, the chances are you support independence, and that's something which the unionists will not be able to break, because people of my age and my ilk and my generation have known nothing but a Scottish Parliament, and we want that Scottish Parliament to have full powers." An article written by Adam Robertson.
From the National, Thursday the 9th of March 2023. From the news section, ex-BBC boss says Lineker must consider post after Third Reich tweet. Article by Steph Braun. It is unacceptable Gary Lineker compared Suella Braverman to the Third Reich and must consider whether to leave his post, a former BBC editorial policy controller has said. The BBC reported this morning that Richard Deere said Lineker had a choice to make over whether to stay or leave and become a social media influencer after he tore into the UK government's illegal migration bill. The Tories' plans to ban people arriving in the UK illegally from ever claiming asylum, which has been met with fierce criticism. Meanwhile, former BBC News director Richard Sambrook said it was daft that a sports presenter's tweet has led BBC News all day rather than the real issues. The BBC has chosen not to quote Sambrook in its reports. In a lengthy Twitter thread, Sambrook said, "I think it's become unsustainable for the BBC to force freelance presenters to fall in line with BBC policies in their non-BBC activities in the current environment, which means the BBC needs to review and clarify its contractual relationship with freelance staff, and clarify to what extent impartiality rules extend beyond news." The Match of the Day host said the asylum proposals were not dissimilar to that used in Germany in the 1930s, having already tweeted, "Good heavens, this is beyond awful," as he cited the new legislation. After the BBC said the former England footballer would be spoken to, he tweeted, "I'll continue to try and speak up for those poor souls that have no choice." Eyre, who's also a member of the broadcasting regulator Ofcom's content board, said it was unacceptable to have a member of the BBC family comparing Suella Braverman to the Third Reich. Amnesty International has already warned that the government's plans are a recipe for more injustice. The new legislation will see a duty placed on the Home Secretary to remove, as soon as reasonably practicable, anyone who arrives in a small boat, either to Rwanda or a safe third country. Conservative Party chairman and recently announced GB news presenter Lee Anderson said Lineker was out of touch and that she should stick to football. And that report was by Steph Braun. From the National, Thursday the 9th of March 2023. From the Culture section, Scots musicians travel to India for Concert for Friendship by Adam Robertson. Young musicians from music programmes across Scotland have returned from a trip to India where they celebrated the bonds between the two countries. 12 people, aged 15 to 18, from Big Noise programmes in the communities of Govanhill in Glasgow and Rathloch in Stirling took part. Big Noise is a music education and social change programme where the symphony orchestra helps support children and young people gain vital life skills. Performing alongside them were young Indian musicians from the A.R. Rahman Sunshine Orchestra in Nagaland, as well as students from KM Music Conservatory in Chennai. The concert features a wide range of music, including works by Beethoven, Scottish melodies, and Naga and Tamil folk songs. During their residency week, the group were part of a wider outreach programme, visiting a local school and university to deliver music workshops and learn about South Indian culture. The Big Noise programme is delivered by the charity Systema Scotland and works with over 3,500 young people across Scotland, including in Aberdeen, Dundee, Stirling and Glasgow. Shannon, a participant at Big Noise Rathloch, said, "I loved experiencing the culture, the food, the people, the music. Just like in Scotland, the passion for music is massive over there. They're all about their music and so are we. The music itself is quite different to what we're used to, but the way they feel about it and how they go about it is just the same as we do." At first, it was a little difficult to get used to playing with the Indian musicians because it was so different from anything we've experienced before, but as time went on, we all got closer, made new friends and loved playing music together. We had a dance party one night and we were teaching the Indian students Scottish Ceilidh dancing. It was brilliant. We've been messaging our new friends in India since we left. I hope we keep in touch. Cleone, a participant from Govanhill, said that although she found it difficult to play the new music at first, she would love the chance to do it again. She added, "At first in our rehearsals I found it hard to play some of the music, but it was great working through some of the more complicated music with the musicians from India and the other people from the Big Noise." The conductor also showed us some similarities between traditional music of Scotland and traditional Indian music, which really helped. I really enjoyed listening to the Indian music, so I would love to play some of that again. It was a bit of a culture shock when we first got over there, but we quickly got to know the Indian students we were playing with, and asked him all sorts of questions about life in India. On our last day we had a bit of a leaving party, and we were teaching all of the Indian musicians Scottish ceilidh dancing, and they taught us some traditional Indian dances. It was great fun. It was great getting to meet new people from a different country, and also getting to know the young people from Big Noise Raplog better as well. I hope we all keep in touch. And that report was by Adam Robertson. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 9th of March 2023, from the politics section, Boris Johnson privately warned Dominic Raab about his conduct, by Gregor Young. Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson reportedly warned Dominic Raab about his conduct when the latter held several cabinet positions during Johnson's leadership. The ex-Conservative leader is understood to have provided evidence to Adam Tolley KC, the independent lawyer looking into a number of formal complaints made by senior civil servants against Raab. According to the Daily Telegraph, who first revealed Johnson had become involved in the bullying investigation into his former cabinet colleague, it is highly unusual for a former Prime Minister to be involved in an investigation launched by Downing Street. Both Johnson and Raab's spokesmen have declined to comment to the Telegraph, the Times and the BBC on the matter. It has been 1 week since Raab, who has repeatedly denied allegations against him, was interviewed by Tolley, indicating the official inquiry could be drawing to a conclusion. Multiple sources with knowledge of the investigation told the PA news agency that the Deputy Prime Minister had been questioned by the senior lawyer. It was unclear how many times he had been interviewed or when. Raab has insisted he had behaved professionally throughout, but said he would resign if an allegation of bullying was upheld. During the investigation, Tolley would be expected to put the allegations to Raab before finalising his report. Rishi Sunak has already resisted calls to suspend his deputy while under investigation, including from Tory party chairman Sir Jake Berry, Labour and the FDA union which represents senior civil servants. Should the investigation be damning, Sunak will again face questions about what he knew about the allegations before bringing Raab back into the cabinet. Downing Street has only ruled out the Prime Minister being aware of formal complaints, although sources have previously said he had been warned about his allies' behaviour. The 8 formal complaints centred on Raab's tenures as Foreign Secretary, Brexit Secretary and during his first stint as Justice Secretary. Raab ordered the investigation into himself in November after coming under pressure following numerous claims, including that he was so demeaning to junior colleagues that many were scared to enter his office. And that report was by Gregor Young. From the National, Thursday the 9th of March 2023, from the news section, Declaration of Arbroath, historic document to go on display in summer, by Adam Robertson. The Declaration of Arbroath is set to be displayed this summer for the first time in 18 years. Visitors will be able to see the famous document when it goes on display from June the 3rd to July the 2nd at the National Museum of Scotland in Edinburgh. The iconic and fragile 700-year-old document was last on display at the Scottish Parliament. The Declaration of Arbroath is a letter dated April the 6th, 1320, written by the barons and freeholders of Scotland on behalf of the Kingdom of Scotland to Pope John the 22nd, asking him to recognise Scotland's independence and acknowledge Robert the Bruce as the country's lawful king. Robert the Bruce had not been recognised as king by either Edward II or the Pope, in spite of the Scots' success at the Battle of Bannockburn. Culture Secretary Angus Robertson said it was a document of great historical and cultural interest to people around the world. The display of this iconic document will give people from across Scotland and further afield a wonderful opportunity to visit the museum and see this important piece of history for themselves. The letter also asked the Pontiff to persuade King Edward II of England to end hostilities against the Scots. The document can only be displayed every so often in order to ensure its long-term preservation. It was initially due to be displayed in April 2020 to coincide with its 700th anniversary, but this has to be postponed due to the pandemic, with this new summer date chosen to give as many people as possible the rare chance to see the document. Senior Curator of Medieval Archaeology and History at National Museum Scotland, Alice Blackwell, said, We are delighted to have the opportunity to display the Declaration of Arbroath here at the National Museum of Scotland. It is a hugely significant document and a vital piece of Scotland's history. We look forward to welcoming many visitors to enjoy the rare opportunity of seeing this iconic document close up. It is thought that the Declaration was drafted at a meeting of the King and his council at Newbattle, then written up in the scriptorium of Arbroath Abbey. Written in Latin, it was sealed by 8 earls and about 40 barons. It was authenticated by seals, as documents at that time were not signed. After receiving the declaration, the Pope urged reconciliation between the warring sides, and a truce was agreed in 1323. Deputy Keeper for the National Records of Scotland, Laura Mitchell, said, "The Declaration of Arbroath is a key treasure in our extensive collection, and we are proud of the role we play in conserving this significant historical artefact for future generations. The display will allow Scots and visitors from further afield to see this famous document for the first time in 18 years. And that report was by Adam Robertson. From the National, Thursday the 9th of March 2023, from the news section, MSP's office hit with anti-SNP banners for 4th time in 9 months, by Steph Braun. The constituency office of an MSP has been targeted with anti-SNP banners for the 4th time in 9 months. David Torrens, SNP MSP for Kirkcaldy, posted a CCTV image of the latest incident on Sunday at his office in the town's Kirkwynd. The banners and posters were anti-NSNP and referred to the Gender Recognition Reform Bill passed by the Scottish Parliament before Christmas. The bill has subsequently been blocked from getting royal assent by the Tories at Westminster. Torrens said it was the latest in a series of incidents dating back to the middle of last year, and has now pleaded with people to be civil, suggesting the banners are making his staff feel unsafe. He said, "Some of the messaging is not appropriate. You've got to remember, I've got staff working there all the time and I've got a duty of care to them. If these people want to come and talk to me, my office is open all the time. I do over 200 surgeries a year. If you want to say something, come and speak to me and we can discuss it in a civil manner. Leave the office alone. It is there to help people who need help, people who are looking for advice and help. I want my staff to feel like they are working in a safe environment, to be able to go out and do their best to help individuals. Whether you agree or disagree with my politics, we can all be civil to one another." And that report was by Steph Braun.
That concludes this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels at Tune Review and tell your friends about our service.